Okay, it is Wednesday, November the 4th, 20, and my name is Richard Wright, and welcome to the final lecture for Introduction to Corrections, Week 5. As you know, there's no lecture Week 6, so this is the final lecture that you have in this course. And that, in fact, the course actually ends next Tuesday night, the 10th. So be aware of that. And so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go right through the material here and share my screen. Okay. And you can see what it says here. Week 5 lecture. And I have the previous lectures all in here. And then week 5 lecture will be in here either tonight or tomorrow, depending on how quickly it's made available to me. Okay. So let's look at the course calendar. You can see where we are there. And you can see we're right at the end. There are no more Wednesdays. So your initial post was due yesterday on sensible revocation. And then your reply post is due Saturday the 7th. And then Sunday release planning, which I'll talk about that. And then your quiz, which everybody knows how that works. And then finally, your key classroom phrase. Okay. And then next week, since there is no lecture, your initial post will be due on Tuesday of next week, along with the final quiz. So that means that you have a shortened week because it was 5.5 weeks. Okay. So I previously sent you the PowerPoints for this week, and I will send you the PowerPoints by Friday, if not tonight, for week 6. Okay. So let's close that off. So be aware that you know, so that you do know when the course ends. There's no confusion here. Let's go back to the course home so we can take a look at the announcement for this week. And here it is. Challenges within the field of corrections is the topic for the week. Chapter 7, and only certain pages, but then chapter 13, 15, and 16, for which you have the PowerPoints, and complete the activities, challenges in corrections, TPC review, and vocabulary review. We're going to look at that a little bit tonight. And then your discussion assignment, again, repeating sensible revocation. Initial post was due last night, and your reply post is due on sensible revocation on Saturday night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. So finally complete the written assignment, release planning, and the quiz. Okay, and so we're going to go over, and you know about my motto, adversity is a springboard to success. So before we leave, I'm going to talk about the assignments for week 6. But right now, let's go into the module. Let's look at the assignments here. So discussion involves two scenarios involving Pat and Chris. And so we're talking about whether to revoke um, the parole, and talk about ways and reasons, or be aware of reasons, both what they call technical violations and new offenses. Technical violations is basically a violation of the conditions that were provided at the time the parole was established that you had to follow in order to complete your parole successfully. The new offenses are new cases that we usually say that you caught a case. And what that means is you did something to violate the law while you're on parole. We always call it on paper, whether it's parole or probation. And what that means is that you're under the supervision of someone, in this instance, the parole officer, who is responsible for dealing with the issues that take place with parolees. And so you're going to look at these two scenarios, and then in your initial post, select one of the scenarios, explain what constitutes a technical violation versus new offenses. I kind of just talked about that. Include examples of both technical and new offense violations. Detail the reasons why the parolee selected should or should have their sentence revoked. Include examples from the scenario that you choose to support your reasons. Describe your thoughts as to what sensible revocation means. And the key thing that you should be aware of is that the idea is not to revoke parole, because if you are trigger happy on revoking parole, you contribute to the already crowded correction system or prison system. And so as a result, you try to figure out a way that would be beneficial for the parolee to help them to overcome the issue. So and so there might be issues relating to alcohol addiction or drug addiction that's not adequately addressed. And we've already talked about that quite a bit. And I'll be talking about it again term 2. I'll be teaching drugs and crime during term 2, and about the effect that alcohol and particularly drug addiction contributes to crime. So therefore, a person can easily violate parole or probation if they don't have the issue that is facing them, such as drug abuse, addressed. You can lock them up 100 years, and as soon as you let them out, they'll go back to it. And then the other thing to be aware is that the individuals will also probably have access to drugs while they're in prison, as you should be well aware of that. That's a concern or issue. So that's your initial post. And then in your reply post, choose a peer who selected the other scenario, and then you answer these issues here. Again, dealing with the whole issue of trying to do whatever you can to help that individual. Now, I'm not talking about slap on the wrist. I'm not talking about going easy on them. Remember, the goal of parole is to reintegrate that individual back into the community and to get them back to living a life where they don't become a recidivist or a repeat offender. That's the goal. That's the thing. So you are placed in a position to help individuals to stay out, provide as many resources that will help them. So now, very quickly, let's look at the written assignment for this week. And you have this scenario given to you as promoted with agency X. You've been researching the state's process and policies relating to release planning. And you know what release planning is. If you don't, release planning is found in your reading material, but very simply put, it basically is that you are preparing to get that person back into the community. Now, you should be aware that the mindset of the agency is to begin to rehabilitate that individual and get that person of the mindset that they won't come back. Once again, as I said, decreasing recidivism and decreasing the prison population as well. So you're serving as a consultant with a select group around the U.S. who've been tasked with assessing what states do in the release processes. And the first state, it says you've been asked to assess, is a determinate sentencing state, which you know what that is because you had an assignment for that. Offenders are released to parole after serving 2/3 of their sentence, okay? Because that determines how much time they have to serve doing well before they can be put up for parole. So an offender who's sentenced to 18 months serves 12 months, which is 2/3 of 18. And then the last 6 months, they're on parole. So the state has a high revocation rate, which is over 50%. As it says, in excess of 55%. So, as it says here, over half of the individuals are returned to prison for technical violations. Technical violations, and I already kind of elaborate on technical violations, as opposed to catching a case or a subsequent offense. So, in other words, they don't follow the protocol of the requirements that the parole board handed to the parole officer and yourself that you had to complete in order to complete those 6 months successfully. So the state explored the TPC, which stands for, excuse me, from prison to community, which is what I've been talking about, and the implementation of things that need to be done to make this more successful and so forth. So anyway, so your assignment instructions, which I will show you in a minute on the rubric, identify 2 recommendations for the state, including specific examples for each of the 2 recommendations, and then explain why you think they would be beneficial. Then you're going to also explain how each of these recommendations is going to align with research, including R&R, which I'm not going to tell you what that is. Do you know what R&R is? Can someone tell me what R&R is? Either of you know? You can type it in the chat box. Do you know what TPC is? Okay. What is it? Well, that's close. It's actually transition. Transition. I mean, it's the same thing, but transition is the process of moving from prison into the community. That's TPC. And I take it that you guys don't know what R&R is. That means, okay, okay, there it is. Risk, need, responsibility. And the key thing is that you look at uh, the, the, the chances of success that the individual has in terms of TPC, the model that we'll talk a little bit about, transition from prison to community. And remember, that's your reintegration role as a probation officer. I mean, as a parole officer. Same as probation, but so anyway, there's this thing again, provide evidence from credible sources. Don't throw me in just one in there. You got to throw me in enough to cover the information that you provide in there. That means a citation within the body of the paper and then a reference at the end. Okay? Very, very, very important. And it is APA, and it has to be in a Word document as well. So now let's go look at the rubric, all important rubric. So it's due Sunday, the 8th. And for 60 possible points, which is a perfect score, remember what I said. Which column do you pay attention to? Mastery, mastery. Yes. And I want you to act as if these, and actually the last one is mastery. But I don't want you to even pay attention. I wouldn't even be looking at the other because, like I said again, your goal is to get the best possible grade, or ought to be. So mastery advanced or exceeds demonstration of criteria. So for recommendations that the assignment calls for, um, why the two identified recommendations would be most beneficial or impactful through providing some reasons, elaboration, as well as examples. Okay. Remember the alignment. Through alignment of the two recommendation, thorough recommendation, alignment of the two recommendations made to R&R, TPC, and other principles of correction with comprehensive supporting details from credible sources. Remember once again, if you do not have credible sources, notice what happens. You'll go all the way to the last and you'll get the points in this column. Okay? And you don't want to do that. And then finally, spelling and typo errors are corrected. Any questions about it? Or is it pretty clear? Okay. Anybody else? So as you know, it's going to be narrative form. You know, it's a paper that you're doing here. And APA requirements, you know that already. Already? You're aware of that as APA, right? What do you mean you're a little confused on the recommendation part? What about it? To identify recommendations. To identify, explain why the two identified recommendations would be the most impactful by providing examples. So okay, so you'll do the research and determine. So what are two topics and areas that we talk about in this week? I already told you. Well, they're not recommendations. Recommendations are things that would benefit R&R and TPC. You got it? Okay. In your readings and in the PowerPoints, you'll find the answer to those questions, but you got to do some research along with it. Anything else? If you go back to the module and look at the assignment, you have this scenario. Okay. Identify two recommendations for the state. Specific examples for these recommendations. You'll be doing it then. Why do you think these recommendations will be useful? And explain how each recommendation is aligned with R&R, TPC, or any other principles. That's the answer to what you were asking me. You got it? Okay. Any determinate state? Well, it tells you that the first state you have been asked to address is a determinate sentencing state. It's telling you. It doesn't tell you what state. It's telling you that the state is a determinate sentencing state. And you're going to have to explain what determinate sentencing generally means and the guidelines that generally go with determinate sentencing, not of a specific state. Okay. Anything else? Okay. And then the quiz, you know about how that works. And then you know how your live lecture works. Okay, let's go into talking about the content of the material. So what are the challenges? Then you're going to talk about TPC review and so forth. Okay, so let me take this out. So there are a lot of correction challenges. And among those challenges that we're going to talk about is to be aware that there's going to be some fallout from trying to satisfy the primary goals of public safety and success for your client. So the key thing that it says, correction challenges include jail and prison administration, the release process, and the barriers that offenders face. We've talked about some of those, and the role of you as a probation or parole officer will be challenged because of the problems that the individual has, such as drugs, alcohol, comprehension, and those kind of things. I think that you will discover that there are not as many people as some people might think that intentionally violate the conditions, but will find themselves in a situation. Let's say, for example, they're supposed to be in by a certain time. Something might happen that they don't make it in time, and then they have violated it. So as it says, offenders are at the heart of all this. Those are your clients. And when you're on, and when parole or probation is successful, the public safety is enhanced. That means that they followed the guidelines that were set out for their probation or parole. And it's good. And it says incarceration is the most expensive punishment. As I oftentimes have reminded my students, that it is less expensive to educate than to incarcerate, and for various reasons, that you have to house that person and provide the needs for that person. But with education, or what other things, vocation that you provide, or drug treatment, alcohol treatment, to get to the heart of their problem, you save the government money. But as it says, many prisons have revolving doors where individuals are released only to be returned or revoked, released again, and on. We call those recidivists. And our goal is to minimize recidivism. Money, staff time, resources are costly and often repeated and wasted with no improved outcomes. But that's because they're not effective in terms of it, but you need to get to correcting whatever the problem is. So, as it says here in the final part of this, as we said, two primary goals: public safety, because individuals who are prepared to be out and you dealt with their problem, you provide less crime, and it provides public safety, and then is successful for those individuals so that they become good citizens and result in contributing positive to the community. I, as an older man, would rather deal with rehabilitation than to lock somebody up and let them out, because when you rehabilitate them, then you give them a new way of life. Remember, I talked about the 12 to 6 on the clock, so that you're at the bottom and going in a whole nother direction in 180. So if we don't have any services given or programs, you're going to continue to see those same people. It's not an easy job. It's a very difficult job. And so, as it says here, technical violations, as well as new offense violations. But of the two, I believe that technical violations, again, can be fixed. You can fix those individuals by reiterating to them. And depends on the number of times that person may violate. Just because they violate one thing and then violate something else, that's no reason to put them in. Remember, the goal is not to lock them back up again. So the criminal justice system's task today is to implement sensible revocation, determine what behaviors that it says threaten public safety and require a return to prison, then eliminating or delaying successful reintegration. So the key thing is to get them towards rehabilitation so that you don't have. That's your biggest issue in itself. So remember, there are two forms of possible violations, and those two forms of violations come in the form of technical violations or new offense violations. The most serious ones generally are new offense violations, and those pretty much, if it's determined that a person committed another crime while on parole or probation, then that's good reason to revoke it and send them back, unfortunately. And then they get extended time, so they have to serve the rest of the time that they had left. So let's say, for example, if you had 6 months of parole and in 3 months you committed another offense, then in that case, then you'd have the 3 months to serve plus whatever the sentence would be for the new offense. And those are the challenges that you're going to face in the system. But the key thing is to try to, again, I repeat, and I sound like a broken record, to keep from locking these people up again, right? I heard one time somebody say, well, one of the reasons why it's good to lock them up is that you keep yourself employed. I don't want anybody I know who has that mentality should not go into parole or probation, because trust me, with the way that the world operates, there's going to be new people coming along that will take the place of those individuals. Again, keeping in mind that the idea is public safety as well as success for that individual. Give them a new life, point them in a new direction. Okay, and that's the mission that you're given dealing in corrections. So challenges in corrections. So we can just briefly take a look at this. Some of the challenges, we talked about some, but this gives you some of the things that I want you to go over yourself and look at these, you know. So, jail administration, what has to do with overcrowding, lawsuits, staff training, and take a look at these yourself when you're going over it. But these are the 4 categories from jail administration, prison administration, offender release and barriers, and you find yourself dealing with the challenges that we just got through talking about: offender violations and revocation. And so you go through this whole thing, and you want to try to, again, the goal, as I said, is to decrease the overcrowdedness. You have to be able to do your job professionally so that you don't find yourself in a lawsuit, and follow the protocol of what you've been trained as an individual to benefit those individuals. Your idea is not to make friends with them, but to help them, and then make sure that it's determined with you, and there are other team members like psychologists, psychiatrists, and others who help to deal with what the adequate programs, doctors, and so forth. So then prison administration, and you go through that. So, and then offender release, preparation, barriers. So I'm not going over all of these things. These are things that help you with your assignment. Now, transition from prison to community, TPC. Effective transition begins with intake. That's why I said at the beginning that when they first come in, your philosophy ought to be to prepare them for leaving. That's from day one. And then all correction staff participate effectively in the role that they are assigned to the individuals that they have to deal with. And the key thing is, again, to move that person towards not coming back or decreasing recidivism. Okay, so talking about what works, target thinking. That is, have a goal, have a plan, set it out, work it, meet the EBT criteria. The key thing is, again, focus on the assignment or project that works for that person. What doesn't work is constantly providing sanctions and punishment. So what you want to do is remember what works is if the person needs treatment for drugs, treatment for alcohol, education, get them a vocation, those kinds of things. You have to be able to point that person in that direction and help them while they're incarcerated. And so again, sanctions and punishments don't really work because they're not really, the person's not always going to be in prison. One of the things that makes a difference, and I've heard this said by several correction officers, including one of my students who's correction officer at the Illinois Department of Corrections, she said, you must be firm and fair. But then there's one more that's not on here, and consistent. And the key thing is firm so that you're not weak in terms of dealing with these inmates or individuals. And you have to be fair across the board. You don't show favoritism, because when you get to that point, it's not going to be successful. You have to have good communication skills. That's one of the things that's very important. We talked about that early on as one of our transferable skills, being able to reach the individuals. And then finally, the last one, we've been talking about that, helping that individual to change. And then the TPC building blocks. I'm not going to go over these, but you're going to take time and you're going to spend some time going over this, because this is part of the research actually for your paper. And then you're going to go over, you know, what is valid and what works and target needs and so forth. Case planning, as I was saying earlier, preparing a plan to meet the needs of that individual. And then it talks about effective interventions based on the research, cognitive behavior, dealing with the mind. Why do they do these things? What does it? Skill directed practices. See what kind of skills you can give those individuals or help lead them to that will cause them not to come back again. And then it goes on, because this is a 25-minute piece. So you want to make sure that you take the time to go over this, and it will help you in terms of completing your assignment. It'll help you to understand what is really going on here. All right, so dealing with the TPC review, that is transitioning those individuals from prison to the community. And there's a general model that takes place that you utilize in terms of helping them. And they have several steps. The first step is to assess what those needs are. And I'm not going to elaborate on that, But if you clicked on this, you will see what those are. And you'll see R and R. Again, this helps you with your assignment. By the way, don't cite the module in your paper. Use seamless case plans. In other words, focus on the big four with attention to critical thinking and skill deficit, always seeking to change that individual. Effective interventions. Collaborate with stakeholders. Stakeholders, faith-based communities, churches, organizations, treatment providers understand R&R and utilize their programming. Whatever is needed to deal with those individuals, utilizing people that they know, immediate family, mentors, peers. When you run into a problem is if you have those individuals, like some people that I have run across, where their family consists of a family of criminals. And then final point is complications and barriers. These are some things that create problems for you trying to help these individuals. Lack of understanding, how to implement a philosophical change for prison employees, what works, who does this work, correction officers, and what your roles will be. Probation officers, everybody as a team work together to create an environment or teaching those individuals so that they go into the new direction, i.e. leaving 12 o'clock and going to 6 o'clock. Okay. And there's some problems like not enough money around and stuff like that that's spent on these kinds of things. So this is a review of the things that you have to deal with in terms of dealing with TPC to reduce recidivism and individuals going back and making those of us who are victims or who could become victims of those individuals. And it says enhancing the public safety to improve the life of everybody. That's where I would put it. Okay. Any questions about any of that? Okay. I try to remind you of one thing, that this is a very easy thing to do. You have a lot of, as individuals who become correction workers in whatever area they work in, dealing with either probation, parole, dealing with individuals as correction officers, you will find yourself becoming a psychologist. You will find yourself to a point being a disciplinarian, but that's not the main goal. What you should be is someone who tries to put the most positive spin on dealing with individuals so that, again, you point them in a new direction. I will tell you this, there are some people who, trust me, you might think the simplest thing they know from right from wrong, but it's because of the way that they think. Now, one of the things that I do tell you is I don't like extensive prison sentences or jail sentences because you're exposed to individuals who are lifers or been there a long time, and you can find yourself adapting to that type of life. And guess what happens? You have to have that programmed or reprogrammed when you come back out again, because the mentality that you have. That's why individuals who are wrongfully convicted and sentenced, oftentimes, if they weren't criminals when they went in, by the time they come out, they really become criminals because they learn the life of how to survive in that prison. So now you have your vocabulary review. This is something for you. Again, I remind you, it's something to help you with actually your quiz. And then you can put these two together, line them each, and you match them. And such as it says, a series of organizational positions in order of authority, with each person receiving orders from the one immediately above and issuing orders to the ones immediately. What do we call that? Okay. A management principle holding that a supervisor can effectively oversee only a limited number. And then, of course, this one is F. So let's see if you're right. That's right. So you got them all right. And these are things that you're going to run into on the quiz. And then you got 4 of these. So you got 10. So that means you got the first page correct. And you go through and you do those. Okay. All right. So any question? Oh, any questions about this first? Okay. So now let's quickly take a look at week 6 before I give you your key phrase. Your assignments for next week are to deal with your peer feedback. And remember, both of your discussion posts for next week are due on the 10th, which is the last day of class. You can do them before that. And then, of course, the only other thing you have is your quiz. Again, you have 3 opportunities to do it. The last opportunity will be the 10th at 11:59 p.m. Any that are submitted after that will not, I repeat, will not be graded. Even if you complete them, then I'm going to, I have a system where I can ignore the grade there for it. Okay. And the topic that you're dealing with is the future of corrections. And if you go through dealing with evidence-based practices, and here it is right here, and you're going to go through this EBP, evidence-based practices, and you're going to talk about, look at these, and you're going to see your dilemmas that you run into corrections, such as what you're supposed to be doing, the mission, the methods that you use, the structure, the personnel, and then of course the cost. And then you'll go over and you'll look at each of these. Then you're going to deal with corrections today and incarceration and so forth. The race and ethnicity in the correctional context, and then looking forward to the future, the 4 trends, evidence-based practices that you will have studied earlier, utilizing technology, falling crime rates, because that's the key thing you want to do, and then professionalism. The 3 challenges: reinvigorate a new correctional leadership, refocus on what works, and reclaim the moral and ethical high road. And so this tells you more about it if you go down and you look at these, and then there's a vocabulary review also that goes with that. Any questions about next week's? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give you a key phrase. Any ideas? Nope. That's a good guess, though. Kind of. I'll tell you. It's a little lengthy. Challenges of corrections. That's the whole theme for this whole module. Challenges of corrections. That's what you need to give me to get your points. And I'll say it one more time. Challenges of corrections. Everybody got it? Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to wish you guys the best. I know this has been a pretty quick 5.5 weeks. I told you from the beginning that it would be over before you knew it. And that I wish you guys the best, the success. Um, I don't know if I'll be seeing any of you next course. Next, I'm teaching 3 things. One of them, I don't think you'll be taking, that's constitutional law. But anybody taking drugs and crime or introduction to criminal law next term? Policing in America. Okay. Anybody taking introduction? Have you had introduction to criminal law? I don't think so. Okay. Drugs and crime? Okay. Well, perhaps I'll see you guys down the road on that because that's what I will be teaching starting next Wednesday. So, all right, with that, I'm going to say good night to you guys. Continue to stay safe. Be careful out there. It's kind of wild out there. We know we're dealing with this pandemic, but then there's also one other factor that since the election appears to be going in a certain way, there are people, and I've already seen it now because I was out today, that are not happy with the results and have demonstrated bad behavior. So just be careful out there. Just be careful out there because it's yeah, yeah, in Minneapolis for sure. Yeah, I know. I know, and dealing with all the circumstances and situations there. My um, my friends who are in Florida and students, uh, be careful because there's some pretty bad situations happening. Texas, same kind of thing happening, but it's not just, it's everywhere right now because there's going to be a change. We believe. Still working on it, but anyway. You don't watch the news. It's undetermined right now, but it appears that Biden is very, very close to being elected. But they are, yeah, yeah. That's the direction that it's going in. So I don't mind telling my students that if you're my friend on Facebook, which I given you an opportunity, Richard Wright JD, you'll see me with my Biden gear on, face mask and everything. So, but I don't impose on my students what they should decide or um, what they should do. But I just stand for justice. I stand for good manners and respect and dignity. I don't like liars. Period. That's it. So anyway, that's it, guys. So Christy says she don't watch the news. You should watch the news. And the reason why I say you should watch the news so you can be aware of what's happening around you. It's very, very important for you. Where are you, Christy, and what state are you in? Oh, Georgia. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, Georgia. Yeah, I got my daughters in it, and I forgot the name of the suburb, but it's right outside of it's right outside of Atlanta. Let's see. She said she is in Austell. You know what Austell is? Yeah. Yeah, she's in Austell, Georgia. That's where she is. For now, anyway, she's renting a house, but she's getting ready to buy another house. So Columbus, I okay, I don't know much about how Georgia. Only things I know in Georgia, Atlanta and some of the suburbs, Savannah, which is way down at the bottom. So is Columbus way near the north, south of Atlanta? Oh, okay, okay, all right. All right, guys. So again, I'll see you hopefully down the road. Again, I remind my students that if you, and many students partake of this, is that if you need a reference, um, feel free to reach out to me. Only students I know that reach out to me are those who kind of did pretty well in the course. But remember I said this at the beginning. The key is following that last column of the rubric. If you act as if those other three on the left don't exist, you'll end up with B or A. And that's the thing here. So all right, guys. Good night. Again, it was my pleasure, and stay safe. Me too.